Alright, so as you already know, Sonic Frontiers is coming out in just over a month, which means everyone's opinions are running rampant, and we've got a few more critic opinions that we need to discuss, one of which includes Kronos Island, and there's a reason why I'm discussing these two in particular, aside from the fact that they're the most recent ones. And of course, the PC requirements of Sonic Frontiers have been updated with more details, so we're going to discuss that for those of you who are going to be getting on PC. So we're going to get into all this right now. But if you're subscribed to the channel already, please make sure to subscribe. We're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers and hopefully 10,000 subscribers before Sonic Frontiers comes out. So we're going to quickly go through the PC requirements and then we could talk about these critic opinions, which I think are very important. Alright, so if we go to the Steam page, you can see now that they've updated the site. So we go down here, and they've got this image here to show you what you get the digital deluxe version, which is just in-game collectible. So I guess you'll beat the game quicker if you do that. But anyway, you can look at the requirements here. Same 64-bit processor, requires an i5-3470 or Ryzen 5 1400. These are older CPUs. This is a 3rd gen i7. You can Google this right now. If you go there, this thing came out in like 20 something. Why am I looking at emojis? This thing came out in like June 2012. So realistically, if you've been gaming on your PC, you're probably Gucci, right? 8 gig RAM, you should have that, okay? GTX 660, again, this came out 2012, okay? That was a time when generations were still recent. And then AMD HD 7870, DirectX 11, again, you should have that. 30 gig available space. I mean, get a hard drive if you don't have the space for that. Come on, like, let's be real. And this will get you to run the game. It's got these additional notes now. This should get you to run the game at 720p low settings at 30 FPS. Requires a CPU which supports the AVX and SSE4 instruction set, which realistically, if you got this or above, it should, right? So you should be Gucci with that. They're telling you you're gonna get 720p low at 30 FPS, so don't be expecting anything miraculous. And they got the recommended settings here, you know, i5 6600 or AMD Ryzen 5 2600, 12 gig RAM, GTX 1070, 8 gig, or AMD Radeon RX Vega 56, 8 gig. And again, the 1070 came out June or May 2016 was released, and it came out May and June 10th. So slightly more recent, but this is the recommended settings. But again, obviously you need the same amount of space, and this will get you 1080p at high settings, 60 FPS. So we should realistically compare this to the Forces settings if you want to get the ultimate comparison to how much more demanding this is. Because if you've got Forces, which if you're watching a channel like this, which covers little bits of Sonic news, you probably have played Forces. If we go to Forces right now and compare the requirements, this only shows minimum, but Frontiers was asking for minimum a GTX 660, whereas this is asking for a GTX 750 Ti on its minimum. So if we compare a GTX 660 to a 750 Ti, we can see here the 750 Ti is the weaker one. The 660 is slightly higher. You can see here 27% average score, 22% overclocked score. So we can see, yep, the 660 is slightly higher than the 750 Ti. Even though one starts at 7, the 50 means it's a lower budget card for those of you who aren't PC savvy. So it's a slight bump up, but not by much. And this is an important point because I'll get to that in a sec. But the recommended only talks about 1080p high at 60 FPS. If you want to be busting it at 4K, assuming there's an ultra setting, this is obviously not going to be enough. You're probably going to want something higher. If we look at Sonic Forces running at a 3080, you can see that at 4K max settings, it's getting 191, 180, 170 FPS in Lost Valley. Let me zoom it in so you can see a bit better. So even though it felt choppy to me, it's supposedly running at that frame rate. And maybe their recording software is shit. But yes, it's dropped down here to 60. But that means if you want to run Frontiers at 4K 60, you're probably going to be needing something like a 3080 or around that level of power, 3070. Maybe 20 series could do it as well. But you can see here the frame rate is going to be pretty decent at 4K. Given that Frontiers requirements don't seem to be that much higher than the Forces requirements. They are higher, but it's not like next level high, because apparently they do run on the same engine. So if you are a PC gamer, try running Forces with your GPU at the settings that you want to run it at, maybe like 4K or whatever, or 1080p if you got weaker hardware, and see what frame rate you're getting. Unlock the frame rate and see what frame rate you're getting. And if it's well above 60, then I guess you should be fine with Frontiers as well. If you're struggling to push 60, then either you're going to have to turn down some settings, or maybe you won't get the resolution you want with Frontiers and you have to turn the resolution down or something like that. But it seems like performance-wise, it's not going to be that much different from the game that came 5 years ago. So most people who are able to run Forces should be fine, which is a good thing, because I got my 38 and I'm ready to bust this out of 4K. Ideally high refresh rate, because just caught that 144Hz monitor, which I unboxed on the Non-Sonic channel, link in the description over there. But let's get into these reviews, and these are important reviews. That's why I'm covering these ones in particular, right? Because they not only make me look right, but but you know, they're actually important because, well, that was the main reason. Well, their opinions about the game from the critics. This is from PC Gamer, and it says this one's a negative one, the next one is a bit more positive. So we'll start with the negative one first, and we'll get into the more positive one. It says, Sonic Frontiers feels like an incoherent mess, and a boring one at that. I'm still warming up to the Blue Blood's latest endeavor. I'm bouncing through a cyberspace portal, one of Sonic Frontiers' mini stages. Sonic's erratic movement has caused me to slip off a rotating platform one time too many, and I'm growing tired. Remember the rotating platforms? This is the Ares Island demo I think they were able to play. That's why I think they talk about the rotating platforms that were in Dragon Road that they bit for Sky Sanctuary, I think, in Frontiers. Finally, the end. The only thing between me and the goal is a simple jump panel. So a spring. I go at it full speed and it overshoots me. The goal whizzes past me as I fall into the abyss and return to the beginning of the stage. So they're saying there's no checkpoints in cyberspace? I'm pretty sure there were checkpoints in cyberspace. Okay, well, perhaps it had something to do with this being the final appointment of my tiresome 3-day Gamescom trip, but I couldn't help but feel deeply frustrated. A deep sigh unwillingly passes my lips. It's at this moment I realized I wasn't having any fun, and Sonic Frontiers had officially broken me. It's like you make the games as easy as possible, and then this shit's still gonna happen. It's like you might as well just make them hard and just be like, fuck it, let's actually make them challenging. Because you're gonna make it easy, and someone's still gonna complain about cyberspace as if it broke me. It was so tough. It was like Eggman Land. No, you don't know what Eggman Land is, baby. I'm sorry. I wanted to like Sonic Frontiers. The Blue Blur has the world as his own personal playground. Railings to grind and jump pads to launch off, sprinkled across grand plains and sandy trenches. It sounded great in concept, but after playing 30 minutes of the game's second island, so remember this is Ares Island, I'm not too sure Sonic should be given the whole world to blitz through. Don't get me wrong, burning rubber across Desert Island Ares is as fun as it is in any other Sonic game, but there's an awful lot of empty space which suffers from pop-ins of rails and other classic Sonic traversal doodads. They appear awful suddenly and have the thoughtful placement of a drunk man playing Jenga. That was a good point though, and I mean the way they put that, drunk man playing Jenga, that's a good point, I'm sorry. There's a real lack of flow to them, and in a game that already looks a bit rough, further hampens the overall level design. When I think of the bombastic levels of Sonic Past, Frontiers is awfully soulless in comparison. Which past are you talking about? Because if you go mention some meta era shit, I'm gonna have to tell you something. It says ring out. I scurry around and quickly come across a Guardian, large boss encounters that incorporate some light action with puzzling. I ascend into the air by grinding along a series of rings before reaching 3 large rings circling the boss itself. Is that the I forgot the name of it, but the Guardian you play in the first island? I don't know. Maybe there's a repeat. It's relatively simple work at first, having to fully highlight all 3 rings, shout out T-Pain, before I'm allowed to whack at the boss. I'm flung back to the ground, forced to climb once again. It's a little slow and frustrating, and then extra projectiles flung at me during round 2 see me lose all my rings and eat dirt. I don't have the heart to attempt the slow ascension once again. Most of my time was spent sort of scurrying around, figuring out just what to do next. It was hard to get a grasp of Sonic Frontiers' many systems in the short time frame. It feels like there are a number of different mechanics, modes, and mini-games to sink my teeth into. I mean, it is an open world game, there's going to be plenty of things to do. Every other loading screen, I'm thrown into a tutorial or a drill to learn the game's various mechanics, another thing that feels like it interrupts Sonic's flow. Learning mechanics really do be interrupting the flow of games. I mean, I wish I could just not learn the mechanics. I can't help but feel like Sonic Frontiers is just an incoherent mess, and for me personally, a mess I wasn't having much fun with. Sonic Frontiers is the perfect example of how not every game needs to try and make grand open world formats work. Linear is cool, baby, and I feel as though Sonic has a much better time when he's given a little less space to play around with. Being the fastest lad in the world is sweet, but it doesn't have the time impact when half of that world is an empty desert. I hope if I have a little more time to learn its intricacies, I can find a fun experience, albeit one wrapped in lifeless level design. And even though they're saying that linear is the way, I feel like at the beginning, you were talking about cyberspace and that you died and you had to go back to the beginning and you weren't happy. So you didn't even like the cyberspace, clearly, but I don't know. This is one of those things where they said cyberspace was better, but then at the beginning, they were like, I had to go back to the beginning of the stage and I was upset. So they're definitely leaning more towards cyberspace than open zone, but it's a negative review, okay? It's a negative review. But as I was saying, critics are going to lean towards one side more than the other, it seems, when it comes to this thing. But yeah, it's a negative review, and I'm sure there will be more negative reviews, but there'll also be more positive reviews. I mean, people are acting like all the reviews are positive, and there are a lot of positive reviews. Don't get it twisted. But there are also a good amount of mixed and negative reviews, and that's why I still believe the Metacritic for this game will probably be in the 70s somewhere, because I don't think... I think there's too many mixed and negative ones for it to be like a solid 80, but we'll see. We got this one, and it said, hands-on, you know what, Sonic Frontiers might actually be okay. Maybe. And then it says, we played Sonic Frontiers at EGX not once, but twice, because again, 15 minutes is too short. Normally, we wouldn't put ourselves through a Sonic demo more than necessary, and the queue was, as you'd expect, constantly lengthy. The trouble is, after playing the 15-minute slice of the open zone experience for the first time, we realized something rather shocking. Had we really just enjoyed a 3D Sonic game? Is such a thing even possible? Here we go again. Are we simply sleep deprived and dehydrated? For science and our own sanity, we had to check. We're obviously being a little facetious here, but it's basically the truth. Our expectations of Sonic Team's last attempt were frankly quite low before sitting down to play it. The earliest footage of the game was hardly encouraging, and that's without considering the Hedgehog's spotty history of 3D platformers. 06 mentioned commenting? Opinions on Frontiers have been all over the place since its reveal earlier this year, but hands-on accounts, including our own from Gamescom, have been relatively positive. After playing it for ourselves, we more or less understand where that sentiment is coming from. A brief cutscene tells us Sonic has escaped cyberspace and arrived on the first of a series of islands. Starfall Islands will make up the bulk of the game, and the Hedgehog's main objective is to search these environments for the Chaos Emeralds so he can save his colorful friends and return home. To be honest, we're not too fussed about all that. We want to feel how Sonic controls, because that's been our main grievance with the Bluebird since he discovered the Z-axis. Adventure 1 controlled great. What do you mean since he discovered the Z-axis? God damn. We're somewhat surprised to find we have more control over Sonic's movements than we recall from previous 3D games. It's difficult to pinpoint precisely what is different, but it is different in a good way. It's possibly down to the game offering you far more open space to just run around in. That wouldn't make the control better miraculously. They have to actually make the control better. But there are far fewer opportunities to inadvertently fling the mascot to his doom. But I see what they're saying in the sense that there's barely bottomless pits, so, you know, you would die. But at the same time, again, for the physics to be better, they'd have to actually improve them, which they did. Okay, it's better than Forces physics. It's better than Lost World physics, and, you know. We played with a slightly slower Sonic control method, which may have been why jumps felt easier to predict and perform. Maybe, just maybe, Sonic Team has ironed out some of the rough edges that have made the character so finicky in the past. All we really know is that we genuinely quite enjoyed simply moving around in Frontier's grassy plains. The side loop ability Sonic has in this game is a nice addition to his moveset too. It has a few issues, but comes most handy in combat. You can trace a shape on the ground, and closing it will cause some sort of reaction aside. If enemies are in the loop, they'll be popped into the air where you can give them a few smacks. This works on larger baddies as well, potentially forcing them to drop their guard or exposing a weak spot. Speaking of combat, we're not sure what to make of it yet. Lowly grunt enemies are easy to dispatch, so critics are saying it's easy to dispatch here, with Sonic's usual homing attack, or you can spam the button for a flurry of hits. This is almost entirely how we dealt damage, so while we appreciate there'll be more moves to unlock, our experience was pretty repetitive. That's why I said it was button mashy, just like Unleashed can be button mashy too. Even though there's additional moves, not everyone's going to use them, even though you probably should, but, you know, people tend to just do the easiest thing and not learn the mechanics unless they have to. A very generous parry ability lock-on, and dodging all make fights pretty easy, which they arguably should be, we suppose. We weren't enamored either way. We're also a bit unsure about the environmental design. As you uncover the map by completing simple puzzles, you'll slowly reveal floating springs, platforms, and rails. In a more traditional Sonic game, these are innocuous elements that fit the purpose of keeping you moving in different ways. In Frontiers, these things feel jarringly incongruous with the rest of the environment. They also pop in like nobody's business. A lot of people keep hampering on this pop-in thing. I mean, I noticed that when I played, it didn't bother me too much that was popping. It's more so the fact that it didn't smoothly fade in like some other games with popping. Like they fade in the objects, but this one they just appear, right? The trouble is, we understand why they're there, grinding on rails, bouncing up to little hidden platforms, and getting through the world using these as a sort of shortcuts is fun. They're just so inorganically implemented that it feels unfinished. In our second play of the demo, we got to try one of the cyberspace levels, which we believe was based on Sky Sanctuary. This is another thing I was right on. They didn't get to cyberspace until their second run through the demo. I mean, technically there's one right behind you at the start of the demo, but you're geared towards moving forward, so you wouldn't pay attention to that. But the Sky Sanctuary one, if you're exploring the open zone and you're not rushing forward, you will play the demo the whole time and just not do cyberspace. Which is why I said the 15 minutes was too stringent of a timer, and all the people who were singing this game's praises had to play the demo multiple times to get further in, because again, it's the full game with the timer capped on it, right? Well, the full game will not start from the absolute beginning, because obviously the opening cutscene got leaked, and it was different from what the demo cutscene was. So, yes. A significant change of pace from the open zone. These stages are short, fast-paced bursts of the sort of levels you know from past 3D Sonic outings. We blitzed through it in less than a minute, and there was very little challenge, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, but hopefully these levels fill out and present you with more to think about as the game progresses. So even the critics are like, listen, step up the difficulty. Well, not all the critics, again, because the previous one was complaining that they died in cyberspace and they had to start from the beginning of what was essentially a 1-minute level. We've drawn out a few negatives in this preview, but overall we came away from the demo feeling a little better about Sonic Frontiers. The one thing that's played these games for years is slippery, imprecise, haphazard movement, and what we can say is Sonic feels far nicer to maneuver here. It's tricky to say exactly what's changed, but the open space and some general refinements seem to have resulted in the best feeling 3D Sonic game in a long time. If they said of all time, I would have thrown a hissy fit. Of course, we only played a grand total of 30 minutes, so a very small section of the game and unlocked none of the Hedgehog's later abilities, so who knows how the full experience will shake out. For now though, we're very cautiously optimistic, and I hate that phrase. Either you're cautious or you're optimistic. Stop contradicting yourself. Anyway, I want to check something. What are they called? Push Square? Type in Push Square Sonic Review. I want to see what they rate Sonic games. Cars Ultimate at 6, that's fair. I mean, they rushed that thing out. What else have they got? Can I just type? Okay, just go reviews and just type in Sonic. I just want to see what the general ideas are. I mean, probably not the same people. Origins got a 7. Okay. Flaws of original games. Can't Spit 3. Okay, I agree with Can't Spit 3. Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Team Sonic Racing. It's not Mario Kart, but it's good enough. They gave that a 7. Okay. They gave Cars Ultimate a 6. They gave Forces a 4. Okay, so yeah, their reviews are pretty fair so far. Let me see. SA2 2012. 8. Okay. Sonic 4 Episode 2. They gave that a 7. Okay. Okay. Generations. Okay, it's an important one. What did they give that? What did they give that? Okay. Okay. So they seem to have decent Sonic opinions. Sonic Adventure 1. What did they get? Okay, no, okay, you fucked it. You fucked it. Alright? You fucked it. You were doing so well. I mean, to be fair, it was the purple border one. But, yeah. Unleashed. Oh, that's an interesting one. What did they give? You fucked it. Anyway. Look. As I said before. I said this multiple times. Right? Metacritic. They themselves, Sonic Team, said they were targeting high Metacritic scores for Frontiers. I covered that in a previous video. Metacritic deems a success or a green score as a 75, right? So they need a 75 on Metacritic for it to get that, to be considered not a flop, basically. That's what they need, right? I believe this game's going to be somewhere in the 70s, but I don't know if it will hit high 70s, low, or mid 70s, because based on the critic opinions, I'm getting enough positive ones to be like, it can't be a flop like in the 50s or 60s, but then I'm getting enough mixed and negative ones that I'm like, it's probably not going to be in the 80s, 90s, right? Definitely not 90s. if it hits 80, that's like a big W. But I'm seeing enough mix that I'm thinking 70s, right? And a lot of Sonic games have leaned in that 70s region. You got people like this who say cyberspace was better than the open zone, but even still they were dying in cyberspace and complaining about retrying. Like, you know, retrying a 1 minute level, really? Is that too much for you? But okay, fine. And then people complain that the open zone was too long and they just wanted to do the linear levels. And you got some people that like both, or some people that dislike both. We'll see what happens when the game comes out. But let me know what you guys think about all of this. What do you think about these reviews? What do you think about the PC performance of Frontiers? Are you going to be copying it on PC? What resolution and frame rate are you going to be targeting based on the hardware you've got? And of course, a big shout out to all my channel members. If you want to become a channel member, you can click the join button next to the subscribe button. But yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell. Make sure to check out the non-Sonic channel. The link will be in the description. And you know that Mario movie trailer dropping tomorrow. You know that shit dropping tomorrow, or maybe today, depending on when you watch. And we're going to be reacting to that on that channel. And let's just say if it's really good, and Sonic might not be able to keep that multimedia dominance. We'll see what happens. Right? I don't know. It could be a flop. All they got to do is beat the first movie, though. They don't have to compare to the second. If they beat the first, then that's pretty much all they need, right? But that's all I have to say right now. So, the Remy out.